Shalom and welcome to Practical Spirituality here in the old city of Jerusalem at Esha Torah overlooking the Western Wall. I think that happiness is a bit of a problem in that it fools us into thinking that that's the goal. Because anytime you feel happy, it just feels so good that you start to think, wow, wouldn't it be great to always feel this way? And the next thing you know, you're making happiness the goal. And a lot of people do that, and commercials do that, and marketers do that. And, it seems like the whole world's willing to market happiness, but meanwhile, everyone knows if you make happiness the goal, you'll spend a lot of your life unhappy. Because life's not happy. It's just not happy. Can you say that for a latecomer, please? So life's just not really that happy. If you were so happy all the time, you'd probably be on glue. There's no happiness that's consistent like that. People don't generally, for example, most people don't wake up happy, and when people are working, they're not necessarily experiencing happiness, and so making happiness the goal is a great way to spend your life waiting for it to happen, which may be after work, or maybe after your first cup of coffee, or I don't know when happiness hits you, but it could be you've been falling into the same trap that most people are, and that's making happiness your goal. And so get rid of it as a goal. It's just a lousy goal. And it's not why God created the world. He didn't create the world for you to be happy. If He created the world for you to be happy, you would have been like born in a jacuzzi with a cocktail in your hand or something, it just would have been a totally different creation. But there is something that the world is, there is an actual goal, and it's worth having, and sacrificing for, and even having joy in the sacrifice. And what is that? That's worth having, that's worth sacrificing for, that's greater than happiness. A connection to Hashem, okay, that's a nice religious answer. What? Truth, okay. Is an overarching better word for all of this. Service. Okay. I'm so glad you're all trying. This is great. What? Torah. Self-actualization. These are all great ones, and every one of them is better than happiness. And by the way, everything you've said so far, if you actually did that, you'd probably come out happier in the end. Spirituality. Shalom bayis. Pleasure. Esha Torah makes they really push the pleasure one. Pleasure principle. Anyway, you'll notice that the thing that really brings you the most happiness and the thing you're willing to sacrifice the most for and be okay with that sacrifice is, and this is going to sound a little unexciting and anticlimactic, but it's meaning. Meaning. We are meaning-driven organisms, and whatever you find the most meaningful, which for some of you is avodas Hashem, some of you is Torah, and some of you is spirituality, and some of you is shalom bayis, and some of you, everything you listed, are all things. Those all fall into one big category called meaning, because human beings are organisms that will go for meaning and sacrifice a lot to get it. Now, it's crazy what people will think is meaningful. Just go on, Instagram newsfeed, which I highly don't suggest, especially if you're male. But go into Instagram newsfeed and just look at all the things that people think are meaningful, and you'd just be shocked at how random meaning, because everyone's going to have something else that they find meaningful. But once you find something meaningful, boy, will you sacrifice. For example, everyone loves to kind of sensationalize the sport of surfing. Everyone loves to sensationalize that, but you should know what a nightmare surfing is. Surfing is basically a disaster. First of all, you can't learn it as an adult. No offense to all of you who think you surf. You can't learn it as an adult. once in a while I go like this to people in the window. They should come on in. Alechem shalom. One of you want a couple seat? You can both sit here. Come over here. Sit right next to me. Whose phone this is? Table for two. Your waiter will be right with you. Sure. Just to catch you up, what we were talking about, everyone was brainstorming on what life's all about. And what we came up with in the end is that life's all about meaning. And all the things you would think life's about, it's just what brings you the most meaning. So human beings are organisms that feed off meaning. Now, I was saying something just before, and I can't remember what it was. Surfing, yeah. So people sensationalize the sport of surfing, but you got to know what a disaster the sport is. It's a really bad sport. First of all, on the elite levels, how many people you think in the world are elite surfers of all the people who think they surf? Very few. And it's really hard to learn. You got to basically be a little kid to learn it. It takes hours and hours and hours. But now let's say you became that surfer who can now surf. And now you've made that the meaning, because you surf, and that's what's meaningful. And then you know what you do? You spend years and years and years chasing after waves. You just spend your life chasing after waves, trying to get to waves that you can surf. And it's not so easy, because think of the variables involved. You got wind direction, swell directions. You got that there's got to be a swell to begin with. That's waves, the swell. You got a wave frequency. You've got the crowd. What good is it if you're all good at figuring out where the best waves are? That means you got 100 people trying to ride one wave, which means you'll be lucky to come out after 3 hours having ridden 2. And that would be a good day. And it's and the list just goes on. And who says it's not pouring rain? I've been surfing where the only respite you had from biting hail in frozen temperatures in a hood and gloves and booties and a 5mm wetsuit is the only respite your ears have from getting, well, you're wearing a hood, so you're okay with the ears, but the only respite you have from getting pelted with frozen hail is inside the tube of the wave, where it blocks the hail for a moment, and then you're back in the hail again. I mean, the sport is hell itself. And yet we all love yet surfers will spend all these years sacrificing, spending money, traveling all over the world, giving up their marriages and their jobs, because surfers are famous for being the types who avoid responsibilities because they got to go surf. And so it's the number one sport of construction workers in America and on coastal areas. And of course, if you're a builder in California, for example, or Australia, you know that if there are big waves, you have no one working that day. And no one will be there. And if it's a good winter altogether, or a good summer altogether, the place just never gets built, and which gets very costly if you're a builder. And the point is that we make meaning. I was just giving an example of a really stupid thing to make meaningful. But if you want stupid ideas of making something meaningful, you can just go straight through Instagram newsfeed and see all the other stupid things that people think are meaningful. And by the way, no offense, those watching, if you're an Instagram poster and putting inane, meaningless things on there, my apologies if I've offended you. My intention is never to offend anybody, but it is always to wake people up. Now, when you've discovered what's meaningful, so now you're willing to sacrifice for it, and there's a pleasure even in the sacrifice, which is so cool, because all of this is la fuke, happiness, which is what the world thinks life's about. People even bless people to be happy. I bless you to be happy all the time. Or you'll get a Breslover going, mitzvah gedola liot v'simcha, mitzvah liot v'simcha tamid. He says, it's a great mitzvah to be happy all the time. It's like, what? Now, maybe what he's saying, based on my shir, is that if you spend your life developing and sacrificing for the thing you found the most meaning, and that meaning is something worth having as opposed to stupid ones, but it's actually a meaning worth having, like, for example, connection to the eternal, and you sacrifice for that and you work your way towards that, well, maybe then you have a great mitzvah to be happy all the time, because you've connected yourself to things worth sacrificing for. But if you look at your life, I don't know if any of you ever went to university and studied business, but let me tell you the most important thing you learn in business school, especially in economics, is that, it's called the law of economy. And the law is like this. You always trade a lesser good to get a greater good. You always trade a lesser good to get a greater good. Everyone try that. Say together. You're going to say law of economy. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Law of economy. And now you're going to say you only trade a lesser good to get a greater good. Try that. You only trade a lesser good to get a greater good. That's the law of economy. And you trade happily. A lesser good to get a greater. Let's say for some reason you're a big victim of marketing and you've decided for whatever insane reason to drink Coca-Cola. Okay? And speaking of which, I was thinking I should really start announcing people's products. I think the majority of people watch me in Brooklyn and Muncie and Lakewood. Like, I should really be, people should sponsor classes, Today's brought to you by Goldstein Realtors. So anyway, if you're listening to this, maybe it'll be the first time I'll ever do it, is I'm going to bring up your amazing company. It's a great idea, I think. Yeah, a lot of people are watching it. Why not? So anyway, why was I talking about Brooklyn just now? Sponsorships. No, not about that. Oh, Coca-Cola is if you've gone temporarily insane and decided to lay $2 down for a Coca-Cola. So what you're making a statement with your $2. You're saying it's worth more or less than that Coca-Cola. More or less. Less, not equal. If it's equal, that's when you're like, and then you look to your right and you see a Coke in a fridge. It's cold. And you're like, oh, it's worth it. Yeah? And then the Coca-Cola is $10. But you're thinking, I'm in a fancy restaurant here. And it's like, I got to drink something, and I can't look like a total cheapskate, Anyone here dating? Like, anyone here? Any men taking girls out on dates? No men date. By the way, this is Couples Day in the Essentials class. We've got couples in their 50s. How many we got here? 1, 2, 3. This has never happened before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You didn't bring your husband? 6 couples in their 50s in Essentials. It's unprecedented, such a situation.
If you think that's unprecedented, I'm a Rav from Muncie, and who walks in? The Rav from the next door shul.
Oh, wow. You're the Rav from the next door shul? Amazing. That's amazing. Are you from Muncie also? Don't tell me you're from Muncie now. And where are you from? You're from Muncie?
Yeah, I know you're from somewhere. I don't know where.
My name's Yom Tov. Yom Tov. Yeah. Oh, that was it? You were just getting a soundbite?
Muncie people, yeah.
Exactly. I'm giving a shirim in Muncie for men.
Men only?
Men only on November. I'll give you a little card. Men only on November 23rd.
November.
Sorry, February. And the Rebbitzin the 24th. Zagovich. I think that's the first time he's ever been to a co-ed class. He looked like he was really suffering. Anyway, but if you had that insanity and bought the Coke, well, the person behind the counter feels the same way as you do. But opposite, he's like, I'm really glad you feel that way about your $2 and about my Coke. And he hands you the Coke. So he hands you the Coke, clearly displaying that Coke's worth less than $2. Which makes you should worry when someone hands you a product. Anytime anyone hands you a product, they're making a very clear statement about that product. That's worth less than the amount. Now, there's cheshbon, there's accounting, because they're paying rent, and they're paying electricity, and they're providing a service, and you got to pay for that. But they are happily handing something over. And so you got to think about that. Because you want it to be as fair as possible. And this is another reason why it's really important, this is a side note, is to use accounting firms for, if you have a product that you'd like to sell. Did I say accounting firms? Sorry, marketing firms. Why? Because you're too close to your product. You think either too highly of it or too lowly of it. So you'll either give it away too cheap or you're going to overprice people. You need a marketer to look at it and say, let me communicate the value to the consumer. Because you're just going to do a lousy job communicating the value of this to the consumer. And so marketing firms are really important. And it's worth spending the extra money, and it's not just a little. Oh, welcome back.
I left my house in town.
Oh, no. It's a bushes. How big a cheshbon you guys make? Who has to come back in? They flipped a coin. They finally decided to flip a coin. Who's coming back in?
It's the first sponsor marketing firm.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have a marketing firm be my first sponsor. Yeah. Anyway, but it's communicating value. So why are we talking about this? I thought we were talking about get off of the happiness business, get into the meaning business, and now all of a sudden we're talking about law of economy and how you'll trade a lesser good for a greater good. And the reason is because human beings are sophisticated in that we're not koala bears going for burnt eucalyptus leaves, but we're human beings, and human beings don't go for eucalyptus. We go for meaning. That's what means something to us. This is why you don't just eat dessert, but you eat desserts in funny colors and all kinds of funky stuff that we call desserts. And my girls are dessert chefs. They do gourmet dessert chefery. And I'm like food means nothing to me. It literally is nothing but fuel to me. And now, of course, I play the game and I eat their desserts, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And meanwhile, I'm like, I hope the food coloring isn't going to color my stomach or something. And food to me is nothing more than fuel. Food to my wife is love. Food to my wife is love, period. That's love. Yeah, they know how I feel about desserts. And they know I'm playing along, but whatever. They're willing to. They always make me a little something that I would like, which would be like cut fruit salad. Cut fruit salad. It's like.
You cut it in special shape?
No. And anyway, but food is love to my wife. And that's what she makes meaning out of, and she will sacrifice for that. She will sacrifice her time, and she'll sacrifice effort, and she'll just put it out there, like big time, to let us know that we're loved. Last week twice there was whole meals set up for nobody. For nobody. Just coincidentally, like this one had aerobics, and this one had Pilates, and this one had this, and this one had that, and I had something, and here she was like, I love you. And we're just like, bye. Yeah. No, but we had leftovers, for the next day and stuff. This morning I was actually hungry. And I came out to find her toasting bread and slicing tomatoes and cucumbers and doppling out, tuna salad and egg salad. And I said, I hope that's for me. And she's like, of course that's for you. It was for me, actually. But she goes out on a limb, because preparing food for me without asking me if I'm hungry is like definitely a good way to have your heart broken. But she lucked out today. That I actually was really hungry. I'd already learned, davened, I was like, something about learning Torah makes you famished. And so I was ready to eat. The point is that we trade a lesser good to get a greater good. What's the greatest good? Meaning's the greatest good. The stuff that brings meaning in life is the greatest good, and we'll sacrifice any amount, and we'll be happy while we sacrifice it. And when we get the meaning we're looking for, we'll be happy when we have that meaning. So what should be the goal, happiness or meaning? Meaning, because you know what that does? That knocks your pleasure time and your work time all into the realm of pleasure, so into the realm of happy. You understand? It pushes your fulfilling whatever it is you wanted and what you had to put out to fulfill it, all into the realm of the happy. Now, your happiness can get even higher, though, and there's ways to make your happiness higher, and this is something that's a whole subject in itself. It deserves its own hour, but it's to move your life into the realm of service. To realize that I'm here to serve people. And that even goes if you run a business and you haven't thought about the fact of the service, you've been thinking only about the money, but move your brain to the service you're providing and become someone who's here to serve. That is one of the greatest secrets in having a happy life, is to live your life in service. Now, it's very interesting if you look at people, some people are really born to serve. And some people are born to, I don't know what, just be dynamic and fun and leading and funny and, everyone loves to be around them. And if you're the server type and your siblings, the like bubbly, happy type who's like always like, making a good time for everybody and having a good time, and you sometimes can live your life like Cinderella and feel so jealous that this one's always having a good time while you're kind of naturally going towards service, while your siblings having Mr. or Miss Happy all the time, or I don't want to use the word happy, but the bubbly fun types, like the dumb blonde types, and meanwhile you're like busy serving the whole time. You don't realize that if you're the server, you're laughing your way to the bank. Because the fun, bubbly types who just can't wait for their next experience, and that's, by the way, those are their factory settings, just like the server's got factory settings. But the ones who are just here to have the next great experience, those people have major ups and downs in their well-being. They have a lot of ups and downs in their well-being because not every moment is some amazing experience, and because they're just always trying to create higher experiences for themselves. They find themselves on a crazy roller coaster ride emotionally. Their lives aren't very stable. Servers are very stable, and they're doing well all the time, as we described, because the meaning is whether you're fulfilling it or going towards fulfilling it, meaning the work that you sacrifice to get there. Whereas experiential people really only feel the Geschmackkeit of life, the joy of life when they're in the experience that they want. Not a great recipe. And the reason I bring this up is so all of us realize that those of us are the experiential types. Let's get who are the people that are naturally, everyone's got to raise their hand. You get two choices, server or experiential. So who are the natural server types? Raise your hand for natural server types. Okay, it's about half of you. And who are the natural experiential types? Okay, about the other half, which makes total sense according to personality traits. That there's two types of personalities. One are called dynamics, and the other are called supportives. And those two types perfectly laid themselves out in this room, as half the room were supportives and half the room were dynamics. But the problem is dynamics have roller coaster rides for their lives, and while supportives are quite stable. And so what do the dynamics do? What do the experiential types do? So our job is to flip it all into service. Flip it into service. And I did this in my own life. I mean, I'll just share a little from my own life, is that I did this very specifically because I love experiences. And what I chose to do in my life is to give people experiences. You'll notice every class you come to, I'm giving an experience in my class, which is a funny thing to do because a lot of people who've never been to my class think they're coming for information or something. You just heard Ken Speary. It's like a content class. My classes are never content oriented. I'll give a little content, like a tiny bit of content I throw in just to kind of be the skeleton of the class. But my classes are always for the experience. And what am I doing the whole time? I'm giving people experience. And so I've flipped my experience junkie personality into giving experience. And so tonight, for example, I'm inviting all the men. You can tell everyone about this later. Make sure everything gets up at later. I'm inviting all the men to the Possible You Seminar experience to teach people how to really maximize experience of life. Now, you might say this: the servants have, meaning the people who are here to serve, have a better life, because the way I painted it, they do. And it makes it sound like the experiential types aren't really having much of a life, in that they get experience, but they often have the downs of when it's not experiential, which is also true. But there is a big mila in the experience. So I'd like to, since I already spoke about experiential people getting to the level of service, so let's talk about the service people getting into experience, is that God creates the world at all times from scratch, from nothing. The world's coming yesh mi ayin. It's something from nothing at all times, which means that in the end, experience is all there is. Anything that's not experiential is just your own concept of it. Everything in life is experiential. Now, experiential people are much more likely to lock in with that. Like, for example, these three guys, maybe even four with Mark. I don't know Mark that well. But like Shlomo and Zev and Ben Sion, you guys are total experience guys. And so your job is to flip it to service, like turn your life into a life of service. And I don't know what Mark is exactly, because he's running cameras, I would guess he's in service, but I'm not sure. And but your guy's job is to go towards service, and the service people's job is to go towards experience. I'm not saying to go towards dynamic. Service people will spend many siblings, for example, will spend their lives shooting themselves in the foot for not being dynamic like their other siblings. Bad error, big mistake. You are spitting in the face of God, who created you a very specific way, which comes with the richest life ever. You have a rich life. And as I said before, there's no downtime, because what would be called the downtime is just you sacrificing towards the meaning of what you can do for others. So when you're doing it for others, it's amazing. And when you're doing what's necessary to prepare to do for others, like my wife in the kitchen, doing for us, is so meaningful to her. It's meaningful the entire time. And so to the experiential types, we have to learn how to serve. We have to learn service. And by learning service, we will I forget, what do we get out of service? It was meaning, that was what we were saying? Oh, I was giving a little hint to meaning is service. Yeah, that was the hint to meaningful life, is to turn your life toward service. And then you'll have a meaningful life. So the experiential types move your life towards service. And it really is very special to do service. Last night I was driving a group of, I had to drive my children to the funeral of I'm not even going to say who, but it was heavy, and very heavy on us. But what happened was that we had about 40 minutes to leave when I realized the actual people who were going to be the children of the deceased have no way to get to the funeral. And so I just realized I have just enough time to get them to the funeral, drive back and get my kids, my next door neighbor, and then drive back to go back, get my kids, and then drive them again. And it was a deep service to do that for them. And I was specifically driving and experiencing the last thing I wanted to do in the world was be driving right then and doing anything. But being in service was deeply meaningful at that point. And I put that on as much as I can as an experienced junkie, to put on service as often as possible. I put that on in just my last flight. I was just flying back from the U.S. I was on United, and everyone was watching this stewardess trying to put someone's bag in the overhead compartment, unsuccessfully. I mean, she just kept pushing it up because it looked like it fit, but it just didn't fit. And so I tried a few times, and it didn't fit. And so I finally unloaded the entire thing and thought it through and told everyone, this is simply Tetris. And I rethought it and saw how, with the right arrangement, it's all going to close. Anyway, when I finally closed it, the whole cabin cheered. And the stewardess was so pleased that this took place. But the last person you're expecting to do this Tetris is the rabbi, the Hasidic rabbi on a Gentile United flight. But it was a service, another service moment. And anyway, so for us, it's service. For us, experiential types. Yeah, Ben Seal.
Would another word for service be like structure and boundaries around things?
You're asking a deep question, that if service, another word for it is boundaries and structure and boundaries, they're very related. You'll notice that service-oriented people are much better with structure, and experienced people are much less structure-oriented, but that's because God created the entire world in the 10 spheres, and you've got the right side, which is the right brain, and the flow people, and then you've got the structure people. So you'll notice generally service people are more structured, which is like pretty nice of God to do that, because if you're actually involved in service, so it'd be nice if you think in terms of structures so that you can actually be effective. You know, you don't want to be a flowmeister in service, because flowmeisters are just going to find themselves constantly frustrated, taking 10 trips back to this market, you know, to get the ingredients, because they just keep running home without them. And so they don't know how to make lists properly and check them and pick stuff off the shelf. You know, I'm a big flowmeister. My wife sends me to the Shuk. Well, she hadn't sent me in a while, but she would send me to the Shuk, you know, the Machane Yehuda market, to pick stuff up for her. And, you know, and she only asked for like 3 things. I come back with this giant cart, you know, packed to the brim. 2 hours later, somewhat drunk. And no, because there's a lot of breweries in the Shuk, and, you know, craft beer everywhere, and they all think I'm the rabbi of their brewery, you know. And, you know, they think I got to try this one and try that one and try that. I don't pay anything. It's just like the owners of the breweries think I have to try everything. And I go so infrequently that, like, there's always something new I have to try. And anyway, so I get home, and my wife's like, after unloading like 1,000 shekels worth of produce, there's like a lot of stuff there, minus the 3 things she asked for. You know, and she's just like, yeah, I'll be right back. You know, we live in Nachlo. We live 100 yards from the Shuk. So it's like, it's just a no-brainer to run out and get stuff and come right back. And literally 10 minutes is all it takes to pick stuff up. Anyway, that was like lessons learned over a decade ago. She doesn't bother with me in the Shuk anymore. But those blessed people in the Shuk, they're so nice. The people who run the stores there are so blessed. And, you know, when I was a young Kollel guy, learning full-time in Kollel, there were a lot of Shabbases where I didn't have any money. A lot of Shabbases. And my Shabbos table was going to be packed with, like, you know, everyone off the wall is coming to my Shabbos table. And I didn't have any money. And I'm going to be feeding 30, 40 people that night. But I learned a lesson early, is that you always go back to the same vendors in the Shuk every week. Always use the same people. Which means you're getting to know each other. And they're getting to know me, and they're getting to know my wife, and they're getting to know my kids, and they're getting to know our family. And there were so many Shabboses where they were just like, you'll get us next week. You know, here's your produce, you know. And they just write it down, and I would write it down. And there are many, many, many Shabboses where the entire Shabbos, food, drink, fish, meat, you name it, salads, fruit and vegetables, all on the Shuk for free. Shabbos, there were Shabboses that I think I probably hit a record of 3 Shabbases in a row, all paid for by the shuk. You know, it's who's like our people. You know, who is like Israel? Shuk vendors paying for whole Shabbos meals, and you say, and they'll feed anybody. If you go up to a shuk guy and say, you know, I just don't have money for vegetables right now, but if you don't mind, I'll just take the minimal amount. He'll be like, kidding? Take. Es mein Kind. And I remember once I was getting evicted when I was a young Kolo guy. Again, if you're watching this, you don't know what Kolo means. Kolo means we Jewish people take Torah study super seriously. We take it so seriously that we're willing to basically sacrifice our livelihood to study it. And there's something called kollel, and that is that after you've been a student and then you finally get married, when you get married, you get a stipend so that you can continue studying Torah. And so I continued for 5 years. And in those 5 years, there were many times I had no money. And there was one time where I was 3 months late on my rent. Guess how much my rent was in the center of town? Center of town, my rent was $400 a month. Yeah, how much would rent be now in the center of town for an apartment for a couple? I don't even know what it would be. Probably over $1,000. I wouldn't even know. Anyway, but I was $1,200. The landlord says, "Listen, I love you. You're great, but like, you're gonna have to move out because I'm renting this apartment. I need the $400, and now it's $1,200, and let's go." So what happened was I went at night to study because that's what I do. I study. So I left my wife after dinner and I went to the study hall in a place called Bate Broida, which is I actually now live under Bate Broida. And I'm sitting there studying, and my chavrusa, that's my learning partner, says to me, like, "You're just not concentrating. Like, where's your head tonight?" And I'm like, I said to him, like, I'll tell you the truth. I'm getting evicted tomorrow. And so and he's like, "Okay, so where are you going to go?" And I was like, "I'll go to Gush Etzion. I don't know. I'll go somewhere where it's cheaper." And he was like, "You told your wife, didn't you?" And I'm like, "No, I couldn't tell her. I just couldn't tell her." And I mean, I obviously had to tell her, but I just couldn't get myself to tell her. So I just never told her. And I was just going to kind of drop the bomb on the day we were moving out. And whatever, it's hard to tell people bad news, It's hard to tell people things. And you're not supposed to bear bad news. And so, anyway, we finished, we just talked about it. I couldn't learn. So we just talked for another half hour, and he was giving me ideas. I'm like, I don't have any ideas left. I thought of all the ideas for the last 3 months. So anyway, I'm walking home pretty sad and realize I should probably wake her up and tell her so she at least can get up in the morning ready to pack. And so as I'm getting towards my door, I get tapped on the shoulder. And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Hi, I couldn't help overhear you speaking to your learning partner." And I said, "You speak English?" He's like, "I speak English," because he was a fluent Hebrew speaker. They learned in front of us. And I had no idea this guy spoke Hebrew. There was a Hebrew chavrusa amongst all Israelis. He says, "Yeah, I couldn't help overhear you." And he says, "Here's $1,200. Pay your rent." And I was like, I just broke down crying. And I was like, "Well, why would you do this to me? I don't even know when I could pay it back." And he says, "You don't have to pay this back." He says, "I happen to have extra money this month, and I just want you to have it." And so I paid it. And you know what? It never happened again after that. And I'm still in Nachlaot 25 years later. But not just Nachlaot, I'm like the mayor of Nachlaot. I'm like, our home became like an institution there. And my life and everything blossomed out of there. And so much came from that $1,200, the cheapest mitzvah that anyone could have done with their money. And we all got to think well when we know someone's in need. Like, we have no idea, especially a young person. We don't know who we're putting on the map with a little act of kindness or a little good word we could say to somebody when they're down. So anyway, so so later I found out that he was living with 5 kids in one room, and had no money, and he really happened to have $1,200 that day, and paid my rent. And he was a person with no money. See him once in a while. He's still learning full time. He's a beautiful guy. He moved out. He himself had to move out. He had to move. And I didn't have any money for him. I was still struggling when he moved out, but he couldn't afford to stay anymore. Anyway, we're beautiful people. Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people are beautiful people. And it's everybody. Even in Tel Aviv, I just can't tell you how much people have gone out of their way for me when I'm visiting Tel Aviv. And I've had people literally parking their car like they found a spot. It's so hard to find a spot in Tel Aviv. They found a spot, and which was good for me because I pulled up next to him to ask him directions. And he looks at this Haredi guy, and he's like, oh my gosh, like I actually get to speak to a Haredi guy instead of watch the media destroy you. You know, I actually get to talk to a Haredi guy. The guy was so excited. And then he's like, you know what, just follow me. And then drives me 15 minutes across the entire, leaves his parking spot, drives me 15 minutes. It's happened over and over again. People driving me all around, like having me follow them all through Tel Aviv to get to where I'm going. And just to juxtapose this, I just took my wife and kids to America for 10 days, and I didn't buy them SIM cards, which was probably a mistake, but they didn't have any SIM cards, which means when we were at Magic Mountain or we were at SeaWorld or we were at the outlets in Oxnard or whatever that area is, and we were in shopping malls. You know, I have 5 daughters, so it's like, you know, they're just everywhere in these shopping malls. And so logistically, we had to like meet up a lot of times. And so I at the beginning of the trip, which our first stop was SeaWorld, I told them like, just borrow a phone, you know. And so, you know, just ask someone to use their phone. It doesn't cost anything, you know. Everyone's plans are not by the call. The plans are for the month, you know, or whatever. So anyway, we learned the hard way that the answer is no. The answer is no, you cannot borrow my cell phone. I mean, I've girls, you know, 12-year-old girls, 14-year-old girls, 18-year-old, you know, 22-year-old, 20-year-old, 24-year-old. Like, I got girls. And by the way, if you're wondering why I'm talking about girls here, is like, boy is okay. You don't want to lend this guy your phone, but like, it's a 12-year-old girl. You know, she wants to find her mom or wants to find her dad. Anyway, the answer was no everywhere we went, no matter who they asked. The answer was just no, 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 no. And my wife actually eventually asked one woman, she said, you know, you're like the 10th woman who said no, and I really need a phone. I don't want your phone, but if you could just tell me why. What is it about your phone, or what is it about me? Like, just explain, because this is just a phenomenon I've never seen. And she was just like, I said no, and walked away. And I felt the same way when I flew United back to Israel just now, because I always fly El Al, but I mistakenly, you know, tried to save an organization a little money by buying a cheaper ticket for a Shabbaton, and I saved like $200. Not worth it. You know, I'd rather fly with people who care if I live or die. You know, and it was crazy. And did I tell this story the other day about the overhead compartment and took the Israeli on the flight to get my bag there? Did I tell that? Anyway, we're very special people, the Jewish people, and we're all for one and one for all, and and that is the greatest meaning also in our lives, is the life of being there for each other, being really generous with our time and with our skill sets and with our advice, or you know, for example, us guys who are in our 50s, we probably have something to share with people who are trying to make a living in the field we made a living in. Whether you did a great job making a living or whether you did an okay job or even a lousy job, you probably learned a lot. You know, and like, how much could you give back? We have so much to give, and you just have to be creative. You just got to be creative. Years ago, when I was in Kollel, by the way, after several years in Kollel, I think 3-4 years in Kollel, 3 years in Kollel, my wife and I got tired of not being able to give tzedakah, because everyone gets to give tzedakah who has jobs, and I couldn't. And so we started a charity organization, which long ago closed, but we started a charity organization called the Family of Israel. The Family of Israel. It all came from, I was hearing a Devar Torah by that extremely liberal Rabbi Avi Weiss from the Riverdale. And he said, if you want to understand the Jewish people, you could call us the nation of Israel, you could call us the whatever, all the other Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, whatever. He said, but if you really want to understand the Jewish people, you would call us the family of Israel. And I was like, that's it. And I immediately I called an accountant in America and made a tax deductible called the Family of Israel. And anyway, after a while, we were giving thousands of dollars a month out our door to poor people and people in all kinds of different situations. And then my wife said, you know what, I got an even better idea. Teach them how to fish. And she created something called the Jerusalem Sewing Cooperative. And what did she do? She took girls marrying Kollel guys and bought each one of them a brand new top-level professional sewing machine, and then would get top seamstress teachers to train them, and then there were a whole staff and then they would create packages that brides and grooms have to bring into the wedding, because when you get married, each couple has to bring in a set of linens. Duvet covers, pillowcases, top sheets, bottom sheets, gorgeous ones. I mean, really top of the line. And then next thing we know, we got a warehouse filling up with the most gorgeous wedding sets for new couples, at which we were distributing to families that can't afford the sets. So it was this is my wife, just thinking out of the box. What can we do? What can we do for these people? And when those Lebanon missiles started flying onto Israel, and that crazy scene, and people were in bomb shelters all over the north, but it was crazy. We had no idea what was going to happen up north. And there were so many kids in trouble there. So she used the Family of Israel once again, and she and a guy named Hanan Kaufman, who used to work with Aish, maybe he still does it, they raised $250,000 in 3 days, all through the Family of Israel, and they brought down 1,200 people from living in poor people, meaning really poor people living in bomb shelters, 800 of which were children, and brought them down to Jerusalem and fed them and clothed them and put them up, and till that war ended, my wife had 1,200 kids, 800 kids, and 400 adults. Literally down to Tisha B'Av hit, and everyone needed flip-flops because you're not allowed to wear leather shoes on that day. And it was 1,200 flip-flops had to come in. And anyway, let's all, if we got something from this lesson, it's give up on happiness. Let it go. Let go of happiness. It's going to ruin your life. And get into meaning. Figure out what's worth sacrificing for, and get busy with that. And you will have the happiest life. Shalom, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, so if you were watching this, a couple options. First of all, obviously click share, subscribe, follow, whatever those buttons are, but join the media club. The media club is called the Yom Tov Media Club.com. Please join the club and help us fund the distribution in all the media platforms so more and more people can get on with this. YomTovMediaClub.com. Shalom. Shalom. If you enjoyed watching this, well, watch some more, send it, click it, forward it, join it, subscribe to it. Keep coming on and joining me in this amazing movement to make a big difference in the world. And the biggest thing you can do of all is to join the YomTovMediaClub.com. Please go online, YomTovMediaClub.com.